All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Haley Trefen, and I'm a public library consultant here at the Indiana State Library. I'd like to welcome you to the 2020 Annual Report and Bookkeeping Workshop. This year, of course, we are conducting this workshop via webinar, though usually we have some folks here in the building. This morning, we will be led through the annual report by Angela Fox. Angela works in the Library Development Office, and in addition to being the face behind the annual report, she is also the LSTA and Federal Projects Consultant. Angela, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Haley. If you've done the annual report workshop with me before, you probably have a pretty good sense of how this is going down. Usually I start with the briefest of overviews of the report itself, what it is, why we do it, and then I like to hit the changes that are made to this year's report from previous years. So those of you who are tuning in just to know what big changes to expect, we do that at the front end. Then we go into the report itself, question by question, and we try to wrap up everything by 12:30. Whether I'm talking really fast at the end or not, which is what happened that first presentation, let me tell you. Anyway, we have so many changes this year that the overview of the changes at the front still going to happen at the front, but it's going to be longer than it usually is. And that does mean that I have to shorten other parts. So if you find me going through some parts a little too fast, especially if you haven't done this before, things like navigating the actual web portal, submitting the report, or maybe some of the questions that I say, oh, that's self-explanatory, or oh, you've done it before, especially if you haven't, feel free to let me know after the report to follow up with me and let me know if you have questions, because there's just a lot we're trying to cover and I don't want anyone to feel left behind, but I also want to make sure all of you get out of here at 12:30 or sooner. So that being said, we're just going to jump right in. So here's my briefest of brief overviews of the annual report. What is it? It's the only annual collection of public library data. And it is a combination of data elements or questions from IMLS, the Institute for Museum and Library Services, questions that they ask nationally of all the libraries, and then we add some questions onto that. So IMLS provides a set of questions that every single library administrative entity in the United States is meant to answer. If you look at the map over there, you'll see from 2016, that's a map of our administrative entities or central libraries. So there's quite a few libraries that are answering this. But they give us that set of initial questions or data elements. So if you hear me refer to a new data element, it's just one of those required IMLS questions. And then, as I said, here at the library, we add our own questions to it. Rather than doing a second separate state annual report, we just throw anything we need to know onto that as well. Why do you want to fill it out or need to fill it out? It provides really valuable information to all sorts of people. It's great for your public. If people come in with questions, job seekers, researchers, journalists, this is a great resource of data that you can trust. It also provides that transparency for people who want to know where their tax money is going or what it's doing. You can give them all sorts of details. It's good for your personal library because you can do comparisons within your own library. See how you're doing compared to last year. What groups are showing up for programs more? What sort of materials are checking out more? It also helps you analyze and respond to community needs. Again, seeing those trends and kind of reacting to them. And then it helps on a national level because you'll be able to compare your library to libraries nationally. You can see how you fit into the trend. IMLS uses the data. They combine all of those administrative entities I mentioned before into a massive data file, so you can see what's happening across the nation if you want to. And it's great for year-to-year comparisons to see those trends nationally. And then on a more close-to-home level, here at ISL, we use it to make sure that libraries are in standards. I'm going to touch on that in a second because I think we all know this has been an exceptionally crazy year, and standards are, I don't want to say out the door, but they are certainly 1 foot out the door. So what's different in 2020 now that I just alluded to it? I think most of us have picked up on the fact that the coronavirus has in fact made things very different for our libraries and is going to massively impact our statistics. And I said this at an earlier webinar this year. I've been saying it in emails, and I really just want to stress it here. We know the statistics are going to look weird this year. We know some of those numbers are going to plummet, and especially programming, reference, visits, things like that. That is no way going to reflect poorly on your library, and we want you to report the true numbers, even if you think, oh my gosh, well, this looks awful. We know, and we want that because it is going to help us show, I keep mentioning national trends, it's also going to show history. So people looking back on 2020 can say, this is coronavirus year. This is how it impacted them, and this is how they responded. So don't be afraid to put in your real numbers. Don't feel like you have to try to inflate them anyway. We're all taking a hit, and it's okay. So speaking of Corona, I'm going to put that off for 1 second and just touch on a couple things that have changed that are not related to Corona, since pretty much everything else. So there will be 2 new questions on the report having to deal with reporting methods. So when you are telling us how many library visits you have and how many transaction visits you have, there will be a follow-up question to each of those where you just select you select one or the other. You select if it's an actual count. So if you're using a door counter, if you're counting every single person through the door, if you're counting every single reference question, or if you're using an estimate, if you're doing a typical week count or typical weeks, however you want to do that. So we just want to know that number you gave us, was that an actual count or an estimate? And again, it'll just have a drop-in box and you'll just have to choose that. And then the other thing that's changed outside of coronavirus questions are the instructions. And all that's happened with those is I've tried to update them a little to make sure that the IMLS definitions are clearly in there. Since we here use the IMLS definitions as our default, what is a program, what is operating revenue, what is XYZ, we always go back and make sure we're lined up with them. And I want to make sure those are clear in the instructions. So if you're reading the instructions this year, if you're someone who looks through them, you may see that some of the wording looks a little different. There may be some things expanded on, and that's just an effort to go back and make sure that the information we use is clearly visible to you. So speaking of standards, I already alluded to this. Standards are really going to be something interesting this year. We are aware that many changes have happened, and with this in mind, many standards are just going to be automatically waived. So do not worry if things that were impacted by the coronavirus might put you out of standards. We are well aware of them. What you see on your screen right now is a list of things that will get automatic waivers. There may be others that I did not think of. If it's something that you could not control that is directly impacted by the pandemic, it most likely will get a waiver, but you can contact us at LDO if you're not certain or if you're a little worried about that. But odds are, if it impacts your standards, if it's a pandemic issue that impacts your standards, it will most likely get that automatic waiver. So this is the heart of where our changes are and where I'm going to spend the most time. And again, if you're looking ahead, if you've looked at the handout or if you've done this before and you're starting to get nervous because you think we have 2 hours and she's still on the opening part and we haven't even gotten to the other 800 questions or so, don't worry. This front end is going to be really loaded because these are the new and kind of trickier things. We will get through the rest of them. As I said, even if I have to talk really, really fast, I can do it. So what is new this year? Hours affected by the pandemic. I know there's been discussion on listserv about what counts and what doesn't count. Ultimately, we have to adhere, I should say, to the IMLS definitions of open, closed, limited. And IMLS, just like the rest of us, was having to respond on the fly and kind of come up with definitions and standards. So this is what they came up for this year. Now that number of weeks an outlet was open, that is something we've always had. And that means that more than half of the hours that the library has set for themselves are open. If you're open for more than half the hours that week is counted as an open hour. Now, the reason I have has set for themselves, because many of you changed your schedules midway through the year, and you have different hours, reduced hours. Once you've changed your schedule, you can use that as your standard. If you went from 60 hours to 40 hours, that 40-hour a week is your new number that you're looking at. So you'll need to hit 20 hours or more for it to count as open, but you don't need to hit 30, even if that was your previous high, if you have that reduced hours. So again, just make sure that you have half of the hours scheduled for that week, that the schedule that you've set and published, those are going to count as open. The number of weeks the central library or individual branch bookmobile was closed due to COVID-19. This is pretty cut and dry. If you were closed to the public, then it counts as closed. And this may have staff in the building. You may be working on behind the scenes projects. That still counts as closed. If the public can't set foot into the physical building itself, if they can't get beyond that door into the collections, that library is counted as closed. And then finally, the number of weeks of limited occupancy. So I have the PLS definition on here because this is definitely a new one. Limited public occupancy practices can include reduced hours open, limits on the number of public members inside the building, appointment only on-site library use, visitor time limits, closed stacked or meeting rooms. There's all sorts of different things that could constitute limited occupancy. If something about how you serve the public has fundamentally changed or been reduced, it likely falls under limited occupancy. So what you may find is that your limited occupancy overlaps with open. You may be open, but you're only allowing people in by appointment, or you may be open, but you're not allowing people to use the computers or this section of the library. So those two hours can overlap. But the number of weeks an outlet is open and the number of weeks that it is closed due to COVID-19 should equal 52. Absolutely. I also see some sound issues, so hopefully, let me make sure I'm not turning away from the mic too much either. Does open mean come in, or is curbside open? We'll talk about curbside in more detail in the supplemental questions because that's where you'll be accounting for it. But curbside does not constitute open. You're giving your patrons a valuable service, but in this case, open is when when the patrons can cross that threshold into your collections, do browsing for themselves, go through the books for themselves. So even lobby side service would not be considered open. They have to have open access to your library and to your collections. I will say a lot of people initially were really resistant to this idea, and I can understand why. You're working hard, you're getting these books for patrons, you're providing this service. But we want to make sure that this annual report, which is a historical document, which does document trends, we want to be comparing apples to apples each year, and saying that a library is open when it's only operating curbside service isn't really the same as a library being open to the public. So we want to keep that open to the public exactly that. Patrons can cross that threshold into the building. Appointment only does count. It would count as limited occupancy, which again could be open as long as you have appointments that are set for more than half the hours of the week. Or you offer them even if people don't take them up. But as long as you have the building could potentially be open to patrons for more than half the hours of the week. Oh, we do have a question in the chat. These hours are only related to the pandemic. That is correct. If you had a pipe burst, if you closed for renovations, anything else, don't count that as closed due to pandemic. That's going to count as closed, but would not go into that particular category. So moving on to programming, we did, Oh, it looks like we're having some sound issues, so we are going to do a quick technical switcheroo here. We're changing computers out, so give us a moment and we will be right back with you. Okay, I'm back and hopefully with better sound here. We've tried switching our computers, thus different microphones, so hopefully this will take care of those cutting out issues. So do we count days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday open and curbside Tuesday, Thursday? So you would have to count days. In that case, you'd have 3 open days per week and 2 days that were closed to the public. Oh, good, we're seeing some good information on the sound, so we'll keep this up. I'm going to go on to virtual programming, keep the questions coming in the chat. If for some reason we get too many and I can't address them all now, I will definitely be putting together a document following this webinar and following Thursdays that includes questions and answers that people have asked during these sessions. Okay, so going on to the programming, we do have 3 types of programming now, which is definitely a change. We've always recorded the in-person programs, which I have live in parentheses there just for categorization purposes. It's kind of a given if you're having something in person that it is happening live. I'm not sure how it would work otherwise. We have virtual live programs, which would be your live streaming programs, and we have virtual recorded programs. So again, the in-person live is the traditional metric that most of us are familiar with. We're going to ask a number of questions about in-person programming. Same questions we've seen in previous years, but we'll want the actual number of programs. We like you with in-person programs to categorize them as on-site versus off-site. We need you to put them into the target audience. So was the target audience children? Was it young adults? Was it adults? Was it general? And don't worry about who's actually showing up. Don't worry about if parents are coming in with kids or grandmas are tagging along or little brothers. Think about who that target audience is, and that is what the program will be counted as. And then the attendance for those programs. Virtual Live is one of the new ones. Per the IMLS definition, a live virtual program is conducted via a web conferencing or webinar platform such as Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, during which a library staff member or other party sponsored by the library is presenting to or interacting with an audience in real time. So essentially, this is taking your programs and live streaming them. The real-time thing is what's important here when you're looking at your virtual programming. If there is an opportunity for someone to interact live, if someone is watching you film this program as it happens, that would be considered a live virtual program. Things that we need to keep track of with these are, again, the number of programs, and then similar to the in-person programs, we would like you to track the target audience for those. And then we do need some form of attendance. And for virtual live programs, that attendance is going to be live streaming. How many live streams did you have? And we realize this may be a bit of an estimate, just depending on the situation. Sometimes you'll be able to easily see how many people are attending via live stream. Sometimes you'll have 1 million and you'll know that, oh, there are multiple people on one live stream. There's multiple children or whatever. Give us your best estimate, and we know that this is one of the more difficult things to capture. Virtual recorded is another new category. And then I have the IMLS definition up here. A recorded program includes video or audio recordings created by a library staff person or other party sponsored by the library for the audience to view or listen to on demand. So these would be the videos that you record and post to your website, post to your social media page that people can access at any time. We need fewer statistics for this just because of the way the IMLS is breaking down the categories. On these, we only need to know the number of programs, so the number of things that you are posting. And once again, we will need a rough idea of attendance. As far as recorded programs go, attendance is really categorized in the number of page views you receive, the number of hits. It depends on the platform you're using, but it may call it something different. But how many times have people clicked on it? Again, we know this is an estimate. We don't know if somebody watching at home is watching with a group of 10 kids or if they're just watching by themselves. This is at best an estimate, and we're sure. So this is one question I got a lot earlier the year when we were discussing how to count programs, and that's how do you tally a program that is originally live streamed and then later archived? Many services will let you live stream a program and then immediately ask you, would you like to save this as a video? Would you like to post this? Something like that, we want to make sure that you're counting the program and that you're counting all of the attendance without double counting anything. And that means that that's going to count as one virtual live program because it was originally live stream, it was originally happening in real time. And as far as attendance goes, you're going to count both the live streams that happened when you did it live, and then you can also add in the page views or hits that you get once you post it. The important thing is not to double count the program, so don't count it as live and archived. Count it as its original form, which was live, and then you can go through and get all of the hits and the views that you had. So what else is new? At the end of the the survey, there is a section of supplemental questions, and the vast majority of these were provided directly by IMLS, and they are meant to roughly capture some of the ways libraries have reacted to the pandemic and some of the things they have come up to serve their public. These are mostly yes/no questions, so they are not super exact, and it is going to feel like maybe things slip through the cracks. And again, I'd like to stress that we know this isn't ideal. We would love to be able to capture much more detail about certain things, but a lot of this has to do with the limitations of what IMLS could do in a short time. A lot of this had to do with our limitations. So we figured it's better than nothing as long to get a yes or no whether libraries are doing this, even if we don't have exact numbers. Now, some of these metrics may change moving forward. We may find that there are things we are asking now that kind of evolve into future questions. I don't see live programming going away anytime soon, even if the virus does. So we may be taking those questions and tweaking them and adding them to future reports. But for now, this is basically a what we could do as fast as we could do it sort of thing. So again, it's a series of just yes/no questions, and they're going to cover things like electronic materials, whether you added those to your collections or increased them specifically because of the pandemic had closed you, whether you let people register for cards online, what sort of reference service you offered when closed, if you offered that, outside services. So this is where you're going to let us know, did you offer curbside service? Did you offer in-lobby service? Did you basically get those materials to patrons even when your library was closed? Questions on Wi-Fi access and whether you increased it. And then there's questions about whether staff was reassigned to other government facilities. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of the major changes that you're going to see on this survey. So again, just a quick question or two about, hey, was this an estimate or a real count on some of those? And then a whole lot of questions trying to give us an idea of what libraries were doing to continue serving their patrons during these unusual, unprecedented times. With that in mind, I want to do a quick overview of the survey itself, and then we'll get into the actual questions and sections. I do want to let you guys know we're aiming to have a break at the halfway point, so around 11:30 or so we'll find a good stopping point and give everyone a chance to top off their coffee, stretch, whatever you need to do. So if you can hang in that long, there will be a break. So would adding more checkouts available through Hoopla be on the report just mentioned? Absolutely. And I'll try to touch on this more when we get to the supplemental questions, but there are multiple ones on electronic collections. And it's things like, did you offer it before the pandemic? Yes, no. Did you deliberately increase it due to pandemic? Yes, no. So if you were shifting funds there, that might not have normally been there, that would be a yes. So moving on to the timeline. This timeline for the annual report mirrors what we've had for recent years, which is in November, we do the workshop. Pretty sure you're aware of that if you're tuning in right now. And now is a great time to think about gathering your data. Who's going to have the reports you need? If you're the one responsible for all of them, what do you have to do to get them? Do you have to contact your internet provider to find some of these metrics? Do you have to go through your ILS? Think about where you're going to get that information and start to send out emails or collect it. As of December, we try to have the survey go live in the middle of the month or so. We'd like to have it open before Christmas. A little early Christmas gift. Hello, here's a huge survey for you. This year could be cutting it a little closer than we'd like. We are doing the behind-the-scenes contract negotiations with our vendor provider. It's just a lot of paperwork that is slowing things down. We are still going with Bibliostat. It is still going to look the same as former years. And we are really still pushing to have that survey open to you mid to late December. But if there are any holdups, we'll be sure to let people know on the listservs that we haven't forgotten you. It's just going to open a little later than normal. Hopefully it won't come to that. December is going to be the month where you get an email that gives you your login instructions, where to go to log in. Here is your password or your name. Here, your login name, your password, all that good stuff will be included in the directions that will be going out to all of the directors. That leaves January and February for you to complete the survey, so we give you 2 months. I know some of you are going to be diving in as soon as it opens in December. I know some of you are going to look up on February 27th and swear a little bit. However you handle this, you got 2 months, and it can be turned in any point during that. It can be submitted online, and then we will have to have the paper signature page submitted as well. And that brings us to our next date, which is March 1st, and that is the day the survey officially closes, when you won't be able to access the online survey anymore, and when we need that signature page. When I say when we need that signature page, that's a little bit of a stretch. We need to have it either in hand or we need to see a postmark by March 1st. So if you had to wait until the very end to get a signature and you slide it into the mail on March 1st, that's fine. Don't feel like you need to overnight it for $1 million to us. Just try to get it to us postmarked on that day. Okay, and poor Haley, she's had to do this presentation with me for 2 years, or for 2 sessions now, and for multiple years, 3 years. So she has seen, and many of you have seen, the same duck picture every year. There are very few jokes I get to make with the annual report, so let me have this one. These are my ducks in a row. This is getting your ducks in a row. So what are your ducks before you start this? I already mentioned you'll have to have your login and password, which should be in an email from us. You'll want to have your help contact numbers nearby, and I'll provide those in a second. Make sure to have all those reports that you gathered, that you've been looking ahead and knowing where to find that information. And then make sure you know where you can find updated instructions. We provide instructions, the entire instructions for the whole survey on the site itself, on the survey itself, and then we also provide individual help on each question. But if you're somebody who likes an overview, you can look at the instructions for the entire survey. Well, thank you, ISL staff for supporting my decision to use the ducks. I appreciate that, even if no one else does. So, navigating the survey. We are, as I said, using the same vendor that we've used in previous years, so it is going to look very much the same. Last year, it had a bit of an overhaul because they were taking it from a platform that really, how do I put this? Chrome was a nightmare on that platform and they discouraged using it. As of last year, Chrome is now the preferred browser to open this up and use it. You can use other browsers, but you'll probably have the easiest experience and the less hiccups using Chrome. So we encourage that, but you will be able to use Firefox, Edge, Internet Explorer if that is your preferred browser. I already mentioned that there's going to be individual instructions for each question. You'll see a question field and then you'll see a small little question mark icon next to it. If you click on that, you'll get pop-up instructions for that question. So you'll want to make sure that your pop-up blocker is disabled. You can use previous and next buttons, which I'll show you in a moment, or the side menu to navigate through the sections. You don't have to answer it in order. You can jump around and do whatever section you'd like to at any point in time. Which brings me to my next point, which is click Save and Log Out to close and to return to the report. You do not have to do this in one setting. I don't really encourage you to do this in one setting. It is a massive report, and I would fear for your sanity. So feel free to save it at any point. You don't have to finish a section. You can save at any point, and it will return you to the survey as you left it. And then in case you haven't seen this before, Adams always gets picked on since they're at the top of the list alphabetically. So you can see when you log into your survey, you'll see your name. Shouldn't be Adams, it should be you across the top of the banner. The survey list, if you want to look at previous years for any reason, you can click on that and it will give you a list of the previous surveys you've completed as well as the one that is open right now. The FAQ that you see across that top banner is not about our questions, but about how to navigate the site itself. So if you're wondering, how do I get to the print page, or how come the back isn't working for me, or the forward isn't working for me, that's where you would look for that. And then the instructions are the instructions on the questions themselves. So FAQ is about the site, instructions is about the questions themselves. I mentioned previous and next buttons you can use to navigate. There's the previous, next. Also the sidebar, you can jump around by clicking on the different sections and the different parts. We really strongly encourage you use the previous and next or that sidebar and not the back button or forward buttons on your browser. I know it's instinctive for a lot of us just to hit that back arrow, but you are far more likely to have a hiccup, to have a page reload when you don't want it to, or cause you grief that you don't need if you hit that browser button. So please, please, please use the previous and next buttons provided in the survey. There's that icon, the question mark that I mentioned before. Each question has one. If you click on it, you'll get pop-up instructions. Over here are where you can make annotations about your questions. So there's two different types. A flag is entirely for you. A flag is just if you want to put something down for yourself, flag it for yourself to come back to it. You can flag it and then you can look in the report to see what questions you have flagged and come back to them later. We don't see those flags. It doesn't mean anything to us. The notes, you'll get two types of notes. You'll get a local note and a federal note. You can use either one of those fields. Again, the local note is for you. You can put whatever you want in there. You can put notes to follow up on something. If you want to put a colorful commentary about the question, that would be the place to put it. We're not worried about the local. If you put it in the federal, it might hurt our feelings because the federal note is what we see and what we submit to IMLS. And the federal note is what you're going to want to use if you get an edit check come back on a question, or if you just know that one of your answers looks really, really off for whatever reason and you need to explain it. If your registrations have plummeted and that's because you had a new director take over and they purged the records for the first time in 90 years, that's where you would put it. It's a place to put your explanations for us. If you have technical difficulties, we always encourage you to check with your IT person or your department, or if that's you, to go through kind of the common technical difficulties. Make sure it's not one of these. It's often things like firewalls that are preventing you from seeing the survey properly. Again, different browsers can have issues, which is why we suggest Chrome. Things like that, make sure it's nothing of the obvious, and then you can give us a call and we'll see if we can figure it out. If you contact us at the State Library, you'll see the toll-free number there. The 317 number is our local number that actually takes it directly to my desk. The toll-free number, you'll just need to tell whoever picks up that you have an annual report question, and they'll transfer you directly to my desk. This is the number you would use if you have a question about the questions themselves. What sort of answer do you want? Where do I put this information? And this is what you would call if you need to edit any pre-filled responses, if you're looking at that and it is just not right. Or let's say you forget your password and you'd really like into the report, I can help you out with that. Bibliostat, who makes the survey, that's the number you want to call if you're having technical issues with the survey. So you've already checked with your firewall, you've changed browsers, it's still giving you fits. We recommend you call Bibliostat. They have a delightful person on customer service who will try to work through the issues with you. She is also the person you'll want to call after hours because come 4:30 on weekdays, I am heading home, spending some quality time with my dog and not around to answer questions about passwords, but Jackie at Bibliostat will gladly do that for you. Oh, I see. Will the notes show up in future years to refer back to? I believe that they will. I will let you know, Stephanie. I will check this during our break. I can run and check this, but I am pretty sure those notes do not go away. They stay in there. So if you look at previous surveys, you should be able to go into your library's previous surveys and see the federal notes that you've put in there. And also the local, I believe. I don't think they get cleared out. Time frame. So a couple general instructions. Time frame. This is for the 2020 calendar year, so January through December. There are some exceptions. We want the most current information for certain things. Those things are listed below. So the respondent or contact information, if midway through the report someone takes over this, a staffer leaves, something happens, make sure you update that who is filling out the survey so we can call the correct person with questions. Assess valuation and tax rate. If you have the newest information on that, and most of you will by March, you can use that. If your library board members change, if your hours of operation change, hourly salaries and benefits. If as of January 2021, you're going to a different salary schedule, everybody's getting a raise, which that would be lovely. But whatever happens, if your salaries change, even if it's in 2021, we use that as information for other librarians. They like to know things like salaries and what's a good going rate. So we want the most current. It's most helpful in that case if we go with what is the most current. As far as estimates go, if the exact information is not known for anything, please estimate whenever you have the opportunity. We encourage you, let me rephrase that. Please, please, please do not put in a 0 if the answer is not actually 0. There's a big difference between we didn't have any patrons using this service versus we did, but we have no way to tell you. So if the number is actually 0, throw that 0 in there. But if you know it's more than 0 and you just can't give us a good estimate, that's when you'll use that NA. So we'll know that you had people using the survey, you have, XYZ, you just can't give us an estimate for it. So with that done, we're going to move on to general information and get through a good chunk of this, I think, before our break. Make sure there's, okay, chat's looking great. General information is exactly that. So it's just your basics on the library. You'll see there you have name of person preparing this report. So if it's not the director, if someone else is doing it, put that person in there. Put the person that I should call if I have a question or follow up on. Time zone in which the library's AE is located, that is pre-filled and locked. I will mention if you see administrative entity, that's IMLS's phrase that they use as a catch-all for where your main offices are located. For most people, that's in the central library. If you have a separate administrative building, use that information to answer this. But anytime you see administrative entity or AE, for the vast majority of you, it's just where's your central or only library. Then you'll give us your name. The class is pre-filled and locked, library director, street address, city, zip code. If you have a different mailing address, we'll ask you to go ahead and tell us that. So if the mailing address is not the same as the address listed above, then you'll go on to tell us what your mailing address is, congressional district number, phone, fax. Does your library have an answering machine, voicemail, or other similar technology? According to standards, you have to have some way for patrons to leave you a message. So that's just a yes/no question. We need your library URL, so the website, and then your public library email address or a means of electronic contact listed on the library's website. So your library may not have email set up, but if you have some sort of form, an Ask a Librarian form, where someone can contact you electronically, that's what we need to know. Year the current central library was built. If you don't know, and some libraries don't for various reasons, here's a place you could actually put an estimate. If you're not sure if it was 1920 or 1921, it's in the ballpark, just choose one. The year the most recent structural addition or alteration to the current central library, and when we're looking for what we consider a structural addition or alteration, we're really looking for purposes of E-rate. So we're looking for things that would change the square footage of your library and possibly affect your E-rate. So keep that in mind. Put that year down, and then the square footage of the central library. Square footage, incidentally, is all area enclosed by the outer walls of the library outlet. So if in doubt, whether it counts, if it's enclosed in those outer walls, it does count. Even if it's a staff-only area, there's been some questions about that. Staff-only absolutely counts towards your square footage as well. We'll need your hours for your central library, and here's where things are going to get a little tricky because of COVID. So stay with me here, and I apologize in advance. We're going to have you do more math in this section than we usually do. But in the first question here, click here to complete the central library daily hours. If you've done this before, you'll know that you'll get a pop-up box. This pop-up box is the bane of my existence because it is so particular with the format that you have to type in there. You can try to type in multiple times your hours and then find that it deletes them out because you put a space in there wrong, or you didn't capitalize AM or PM, or you put a space in between them, or you use the periods. It's very exact. So make sure you look at the example and try to follow that. And if you're still having trouble getting your hours to stick as it was, just let me know. If your library has an atypical schedule, there's a place to write that out separately. So if your library closes for lunch, if your library has hours that can't really fit into the schedule as provided on the table, that's where you put it. And the table itself just goes through Monday opening time through closing throughout the whole week. So in what you see in the 138 here is the total number of hours the central library is open during a typical week. And the total number of hours at the library is open after 5, total it's open on Sunday, total it's open on Sunday. All of these are automatically calculated for you based on the information that you provided in that table you just filled out. However, some of the other things we're coming up on will no longer be automatically calculated. So number of weeks per year the central library was open to the public in 2020. And again, we've mentioned if it's open more than half of the hours that you have as a set schedule at that time, it would be considered open. Number of weeks per year the central library was closed, either due to the pandemic or other issues. Number of weeks an outlet had limited occupancy due to COVID-19. And again, those weeks may be double counted in both limited or open, depending on the services you provide or I should say limited and open. And then total hours the Central Library was open in 2020. And here's that math I referred to. Normally we have a algorithm or something built right into the program itself that will take your answer for number of weeks and take your typical week and figure that out for you. And we couldn't do it this year because some of you have such radically different schedules now or in the middle of the year from where you started out. So we're going to ask you to try to give us the hours as best you can for your central library as well as your branches and bookmobiles. So you can kind of see down there, we just basically need you to take however many hours a week you have in Schedule A, multiply the number of weeks you are on Schedule A, number of hours per week on Schedule B, multiply the number of weeks, add all that stuff together. For some of you who have changed schedule multiple times, this will not be fun, and I apologize. There's just no great way to get the computer to do that, or at least no great way that doesn't involve even more questions on here. Does the library provide internet access? Yes or no? What type of internet access is available? There'll be a drop-down menu and you can select things like satellite, DSL, any of the different options there. And then specify the download speed of internet access. If you're not sure what that is, the instructions give you a site that you can use that's far from perfect, but it'll give you a good idea of what it is. Typical equals normal week. Exactly. So you don't want to do this during a week that, again, your pipe burst and you were closed for weird hours. That's not normal. Or you had extremely limited hours because of COVID, you were, on the most limited schedule you've ever had, we wouldn't consider that a normal week. We're going to repeat pretty much all that information for branches. If you don't have any branches in 200, when it asks total number of branches, put in 0, and then you can just laugh your way through to the next section. But for everyone else, the branches should pop up pre-populated with many of these things. If you find that you need to update the branches, if you need to add one because you built one, if you need to change an address, if you need to remove a branch that was closed, you can contact me. Otherwise, a lot of this will, as I said, pop up and be pre-filled. But we'll want things like the branch name, address, same thing with the branches, and that we'll need a mailing address if it's different. We'll need phone, fax, year of most recent structural addition or alteration, and the square footage. Again, we're looking for E-rate purposes. Here we go. Number of weeks per year an individual branch is open, number of weeks closed due to COVID, number of weeks the branch had limited occupancy due to COVID. And then, unlike the main library, and this we don't have a separate table. You're just going to go through, there's little fields to type in your Monday opening time, Monday closing time, all the way through Sunday, and then the total hours for the branch library during a typical week. You'll need to add that up. If you have an area of the library due to clean that area because COVID, is that limited? If it means that the patrons are limited access to that, if you have to close off the stacks for that part for a significant portion of the day, if you close it off for 10 minutes while you run Lysol over it, I would not consider that limited. If you close it off for the better part of a day while you do a deep cleaning, then yes, that would be limited. We're going to repeat all of that information again with bookmobiles. So for most of you, you will be able to put in 0 and laugh your way to the next section. For those of you who have it, those questions you see on the screen should be very, very familiar. Know that when we ask for the bookmobile address, we're essentially asking, where does it live? Or probably a better way of phrasing that would be, where does it park? Or where do you park that at night? So where would you find that bookmobile when it's not out on the streets? Again, total number of bookmobiles. Oh, I think we have, there we go. Total hours it's open during a typical week. Number of weeks per year the bookmobile is open. Number of weeks it was closed due to COVID-19. So most bookmobiles, or many bookmobiles I should say, don't operate every year. But if you're used to operating, let's say 12 weeks a year, and then you found that because of COVID you were only open 2, then yes, you were shut down 10 weeks because of that. So look at what you normally would have been open. And then once again, we will have you calculate the total hours for your bookmobiles manually. And you will have to go through and take those total hours for your branches and your bookmobiles and your central library and add them together for total system public service hours per year. Again, this is something that used to be a calculated total, but because we have so many variables, we are asking you to pull out the calculator and do the math for us. Moving on to registrations. After telling you how many things we changed in hours because of COVID, it is kind of a relief to tell you that nothing in registrations has changed. Everything here is the same as previous years. So we'll just want to know total number of resident registered users, so basically those who are paying taxes and have access to your library. Total number of users from contracting areas. Most of you won't have this. If you do, that's where it goes. Total number of non-resident registered users. So those who have a library card, but they are paying for access essentially. Some call it subscription, non-resident, whatever you use, that's where it goes. Total number of reciprocal users. So if you have reciprocal agreements with other libraries, but this isn't their home library, that is where it would go. Total number of plaque users. Total number of non-resident cards issued to student users, issued to school employees, issued to library employees. And those last three, many libraries have students or employees, people living outside of the library service area technically, but the library says, hey, you know, we're going to help out the local students or we're going to help out the local teachers. So that is where you put those cards. We want to know the amount of your non-resident fee and the date that your library board adopted this fee. Oh, excuse me while I get caught up here. And let's see, we need this to be above the operating expenditure per capita for your previous year or $25, whichever one is higher. So the very minimum your fee should be is $25. Does your library annually purge or mark inactive accounts for the patrons who have not used their accounts for the past 3 years and do not owe materials, fines, or fees to the library? So both standards for Indiana, so in our state code, as well as IMLS, they want you to purge those records every 3 years. If they have outstanding fines, fees, lost, damaged books, you do not have to purge them. That is up to you whether you want to pursue those or not. But if they don't have anything and are otherwise inactive, we would consider them non-library users or non-active library users at that point. And boom, you're through section 2. On to libraries and political subdivisions. And this is another section that did not have any changes. This is essentially the service area section, and much of this is pre-filled, and much of it is pre-filled with data from the 2010 census. So in the future, we will be seeing some updated figures that more accurately represent your service areas, but as of now, we are still using the last of those 2010. This is the last of our 2010 year, hopefully. Name of the primary county. Again, this is your service area. So primary county, total assessed valuation for library district, operating tax data, source year for the data. So I mentioned that if you have the most current year, if you have the 2021 information for the assessed valuation or operating tax rate, please go ahead and give us that, and then just let us know in the fourth question there that yes, that happens to be the 2021 data. There's a space for your debt fund tax rate, for the LCPF or Library Capital Projects Fund tax rate, if you have those. And then again, if you have it, did your library roll the LCPF into the operating tax rate? What we see here is for libraries who operate in more than one county. If you don't have a separate county, you can feel free to skip these. If you have more than one, you'll be answering the name of the additional county that you operate in, and the same questions for that additional county regarding your assessed valuation and tax rates. This section here is where I mentioned that there is a lot of stuff that is locked and pre-filled, and that's where you're going to find it here. This is where we use that census data. So total district population without contracts, total district population with contracts, political subdivision name, so are you a county? The information here is that for a county, a township, a city, there's all sorts of different subdivisions. Type of political unit taxed, and we have taxed units and contracting units. And you'll see, if you're interested, there's a chart that you can see in the instructions that will let you know what those numbers refer to. But again, we're going to pre-fill that for you. We have population taxed and served. We have the population served by contract. I mentioned that they're in the instructions. Basically, the instructions go into more detail about what each of these are. So if you're wondering what that number next to your political subdivision is, that is what it is. Otherwise, you can just skip on over that. Were there changes to your library service area? And for most people, this would come in the form of a contract change. So if you dropped an area, if you added one, we would need to know about that. Some areas, some libraries may have annexed an area. We would want to know about that as well. So if the answer is yes, go ahead and explain that in the field we leave for you there. And we're going on to operating revenue. This has changed a lot in recent years, but it has not changed this year. So this is going to be the same as in prior years. Operating revenue, just to let you know, IMLS defines operating revenue as the current and recurrent costs necessary to support the provision of library services. Significant costs, especially benefits and salaries that are paid by other taxing agencies on behalf of the library, may be included if it's available as if the information is available to the reporting agency. This does not apply to most of you. Essentially, let's go back to that main point there, which are the current and recurrent costs necessary to support the provision of library services. IMLS wants to know all revenue that goes towards that, whether it's in operating or not. Here at the State Library, because of standards and what is used for calculations, we need to make the distinction between in expenditures, and you'll see this, between operating and fund and non-operating fund. And that's why the operating and expenditure section is going to look a little different. IMLS may not care about operating and non-operating, but we have to because of standards. So long story short, operating and expenditures, those questions may not look like they match up entirely, and that is why. But you'll see that as we go through here. So what we really need for the operating revenue, we break it down to local, state, and federal. And you'll see right here, this is the local government. We'll need your property tax from the library tax rate, your miscellaneous income taxes, and then if you are a library that has a contract, if you receive contractual revenue for service. And then it will automatically total that local government revenue for you. State government, examples or things that you would have in state government are there. So your financial institutions tax, your licensed vehicle excise tax, commercial vehicle excise tax, state technology grant fund, and this is going to be pre-filled and locked. And a note on this, because it has caused us problems over the years because of the way it is labeled. State technology grant fund is not E-rate, although it has a lot, it is in support of E-rate. Essentially, what money is left over for your internet that E-rate doesn't pay, we try to help cover with the state technology grant fund. So this is in addition to your E-rate. We send that to you through an electronic funds transfer, and in the past, it has occasionally been labeled E-rate, which is where the confusion comes from. It is not E-rate, it is that state technology grant fund. So again, we're going to pre-fill and lock that for you, but if you look at it and say, that's not what we got for E-rate, it's not, it's something different. If you have questions, you can let me know, but again, we'll take care of that for you. If you have other state revenue, put it there, and then just tell us where that came from in 410, and then it will total the state revenue for you. Federal government, this is where you would record your LSTA grants or other federal income. And depending on what it is, just give us sources if you have it. Most people don't have a lot to report on the federal income here. Operating revenue for other, this is where it's kind of the miscellany. If you have plaque reimbursement, if you collect fines and fees, it would go here. Interest on investments, gift receipts, private or public foundation grants, miscellaneous revenue, you can tell us what it is in 422, and then it will total that other revenue for you. And then that final question there is totaling the local, state, federal, and other. So operating, we were really just focused on how much money you were taking in. Expenditures, as I said, this is where we differ a little bit because IMLS doesn't care what fund it comes from, but the state of Indiana, due to standards, has to. Even if it is going back to our chat real quick, even if it is recorded as a different fund and is not recorded in the operating fund. If you have money, basically any revenue that you receive that is tagged for library expenses, for, as I said in that definition, for the current and recurrent cost. If you get gifts and you put it into a gift fund, if you put things into separate non-operating funds, IMLS does not care what funds it goes into, so yes, you would count those. Here's the tricky part. You do have to separate it out in expenditures. So expenditures, oh, I went the wrong way. That's not helpful. So we do expenditures by categories. You'll see the first one here is salaries and benefits. So you'll need to let us know salaries and wages of all library staff, employee benefits, other personal services, total personal services, which is calculated, and total staff expenditures, which is calculated. And the difference between 4 and 5 is the difference between what we need at the state library and what we count as an expenditure versus what IMLS counts. So we'll total that for you, and you shouldn't have to worry about that. 5.6 is total supplies. Going on to operating funds for other services and charges. 5.7 is professional services. So if you employ a lawyer, if you employ a maintenance or landscaping crew that is not on your payroll, they would go there. This is also where you're going to put employee databases. So if you have a database or a service only for staff, so baker and tailor or something that only the staff can access, it would go under 5.7. Communication and transportation, printing and advertising, insurance, utility services, repairs and maintenance, rentals, debt service, lease service, others. This really is the miscellany. All your expenses you should, that aren't materials and aren't staff, is probably going to go here, and it will total that for you. And I see some questions on the side about expenditures. So if some salary was paid from a COVID grant, it still reports in 01. I'm going to go back here. Salaries and wages of all staff. Well, that it is specific to the operating fund. That's a really great question that Stephanie asked about COVID grants. Let me see if it's going to be recorded as staff. I suspect it's actually going to be recorded as grant payments because it will not be in an operating fund. It will most likely be in its own designated grant fund. I'm going to double check with that, and if I can't answer it before the end of this session, it will definitely be on the worksheet that I produce after these webinars. Going on to other expenditures, make sure I have the right thing here. So here are the bigger ones. These are capital outlays from operating fund expenditures. For the most part, if you have a capital outlay, it is going to come from capital revenue. It's going to be a huge expense. But if you're using operating funds for whatever purpose, here is where you would report it. So land, buildings, improvements other than buildings, furniture and equipment. So again, those are the big ones. Those are massive projects. As far as furniture and equipment, this isn't, oh, we need to replace the squeaky chair in the computer room. This is, oh, we just built a new building and we need to start an initial collection, or we need to fill it with furniture. So these are the major expenditures. And then 522, capital outlays for public access computers, e-readers, and electronic media devices. We like to know this here at the State Library because we take the money that you spend on that and we put that towards your collection development percentage. We think that if a patron could use some of that technology to access one of your databases or some of your library electronic material, that it can count towards collection development. So what you see on 522 is really an emphasis on machines and technology. So this is a means of accessing the collection. It's not necessarily part of the collection itself, but it is how you would get a hold of this. And I make this distinction because we have a question later on that mentions playaways. So, and those are things that you cannot separate. This is, again, a tool that you would use to access the collection, would go in here. Speaking of collections, we're going to ask about what library materials you purchased using operating funds. And you'll see here we have books. Those can be purchased or leased, periodicals and newspapers, AV materials, microforms, and other non-printed physical materials, so things you can hold in your hand. Ebooks, electronic collections, and database licensing, purchase, or lease expenditures. And then electronic physical format, including playaways and ebook readers. So what I was just hounding on 522, I wanted to make the distinction between that and 527. So electronic physical format playaways and ebook readers would be ebook readers that are preloaded with books. If you use Vox or Wonder Books, basically this 527 is for technology, for collections that can't be separated from the technology. You can't separate the price of a playaway story from the playaway itself. So if the expense is really for the collection, it would go here. If it's for a device to access the collection, that iPad, that computer, it would go in 522. We're going to ask the same questions of you, but we're going to ask them about whether about money you used from non-operating funds. And again, this has to do with standards. So we repeat all of those questions, only we ask about funds coming from non-operating funds for those of you who use those. And then there are a ton of totals. All of these should be pre-filled for you. And if you're wondering why there's so many, I keep saying this, but IMLS wants different information than we want sometimes. We need different breakdowns. So that's where all these totals come from. You can click on them and see exactly what goes into each total. But again, those should be calculated for you. You shouldn't have to worry about those total expenditures for blah, blah, blah on any of those questions. We do have, towards the bottom, I want to point out total non-operating fund expenditures for collection development. I'm sorry, I think that is a typo there. One of those, what you should be seeing is total operating fund expenditures for collection development will be 538, and then total non-operating fund for collection development. Basically, I wanted to point out we do look to what you are spending on collection development regardless of whether it's operating or non-operating. That will be counted towards standards. We want to know how much money was spent total, public access computers, e-readers, and electronic media devices from non-operating funds. Then we get the total operating fund expenditures, other operating expenditures, total operating expenditures. And again, if you're wondering what's the difference, it has to do with whether operating or non are in there. And if you click on them, it'll give you an exact breakdown of what's being added. And total capital fund expenditures. Total collection expenditures. And that, again, includes both operating and non. That's basically adding pretty much everything together that is spent on a collection. 546, the total 2019 operating expenditures per capita, which is what we use for this year's standards calculations. We'll want to see if you are meeting that number from the previous year. That will be pre-filled for you. 547 is the difference between that operating expenditure per capita and the non-resident fee. Does your library's non-resident fee meet the standard? So it should be at or above that operating expenditure per capita. And you'll just give us a yes or no there. And if it's no, you'll need to raise that in the coming year to make sure it stays in standards. And then finally, that collection development expenditure from all funds as a percentage of operating fund expenditure. And I keep saying, well, the difference is because it's counted towards standards, or we need this for standards. And here's where I put the big disclaimer. In previous years, we are looking to see that you are spending at least 8% of your operating expenditures on collections. And this is, again, the distinction between operating and non-operating. We need 8% of operating funds spent on collections. However, here's that pause. COVID has, again, changed that this year. We realized people had to adjust some budgets on the fly. It's not really your fault if you had to take money from certain expenditure lines and put it towards face mask or Lysol or plexiglass dividers or whatnot. A lot of things got shifted. Hopefully you'll still meet that collection development standard. If you don't, it's an automatic waiver for the year. Oh, Sherry was wondering about the typo or mistake. It's essentially a question was repeated. There's not a typo as much as I got really excited by 538 to the point that I felt it needed to be on that slide twice. You don't have to answer it twice, though, I promise. And we're coming up on capital revenue and also 1134, so I think that is a great time to take a break. If you want to come back here at 1150, so take a full 15 minutes, and then we're on the back end of this report, and we should be able to get you out of here by 12:30. So I'll see you in 15 minutes. Listening now, hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. Hopefully everybody is back here. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so we're going to continue on with capital revenue. This is a pretty easy section in that you either have it or you didn't. You either got funds that you specifically earmarked for a massive project or you didn't. And most people can pretty easily remember whether they added a new building or a library van. So just to review, the definition via IMLS is that capital revenue funds are those received for major capital expenditures. Include funds received for site acquisition, new buildings, addition to or renovation of library buildings, furnishings, equipment, and initial collections, print, non-print, and electronic for new buildings, building additions, or building renovations, computer hardware and software used to support library operations, to link to networks, or to run information products, new vehicles, and other one-time major projects. And here the key word is major. Again, you may have repairs, you may be doing a slight upgrade to your computer network, but what we're looking here is massive investments, first-time collections, first-time computer infrastructure, things like that. Would a new chiller go in this location? I would have to know what a chiller is first, which as I am embarrassed to say, I do not. So the additional appropriation, LRF and rainy day, absolutely. Yep. Capital Revenue Fund is often comes from LRF or rainy day. It's those funds were earmarked for that project. So these are things that are just not coming from operating funds, but for special project funds. So bond reissue, refunding and reissuing with project money would go here. Yes. Oh, our air conditioner at a library building. Oh, wow, that is a massive investment. You've got me really wondering here, Beth, because that is technically a repair, but it is a pretty massive one. I would be curious to know what funds you were using to pay for it, and if it was something you anticipated or something that was kind of an abrupt and had to fix at the moment. Anyway, I can get back to you individually on that, because that is, you guys are so good at stumping me. One of these years. I'll see what I can find. Trying to forward here, and there we go. Okay, so as I said, capital revenue is pretty cut and dry unless you are Muncie and you broke your air conditioner. So for the rest of us, local government capital revenue, state government, federal, and other. We just break it down into 4 sources, tell us where you got that capital revenue from and how much, and then we'll total it up for you. Oh, somebody else is asking about air conditioning. Well, apparently this year was rough on air conditioners. I will share, I don't think I'll have that by the end of this presentation, but you know what? That sounds like a great question to follow up with on the worksheet that I will be sharing out later and posting on this web page. Going on to employment data. This is information about the number of people you have working for you. So we'll start with the number of librarians with a degree. So ALA, MLS degree, it could be a Master of Library Sciences, it could be a Master of Information Sciences. There's all sorts of degrees now that are acceptable. If you're in doubt, you can click on the little question mark and it lists for you what is considered an acceptable degree. Total number of paid hours a week for all degreed librarians, and then the full-time equivalent for all librarians with an ALA MLS. And we say full-time equivalent, that is automatically calculated for you. Again, we like to be able to compare things nationally. The national standard was set at 40 hours a week for full-time, so we use that across the board, across all the states, regardless of what your library may consider full-time. The next question, total number of librarians, including the degreed librarians. And I put this in there because this always trips up people. It's so easy. It's not necessarily intuitive. It's so easy to trip them up. We are recounting those degreed librarians. So if you have 3 degreed librarians and 4 non-degreed, you have 3 degreed, and then down on your total number of librarians, you have 7 because you are counting those degreed librarians again. Your answer in 704 must be more than your answer in 701, or possibly equal, but it cannot be less than. I know that seems a silly thing to stress, but it's so easy to go through here and just not catch that the first time through, and then you get a confused phone call from me saying, do you really have half a person working at your library? And just a moment of clarification, we always get questions about what is a librarian, and we say this is kind of a subjective thing. We do have a definition from IMLS, and at some point you just have to decide whether your staff qualifies or not, but the IMLS definition is the title or function of librarian who perform paid work that usually requires professional training and skill in the theoretical and or scientific aspects of library work as distinct from its mechanical or clerical aspect. So does this require some further training, whether at a library school or on the job or whatever, but it goes beyond and separate and distinct from mechanical or clerical. I can't make that call for you. You have a pretty good sense. If you call them a librarian at your library, they are probably a librarian. And then finally, we'll take the total number of paid hours per week for all librarians. We do that whole full-time equivalent automatically for you, dividing that number by 40. Okay, I see, I was just informed there's some questions on the chat. So whether calculating we meet that standard, we would tally collection expenditures across all funds compared to total operating expenditures. Is that correct? We would be tallying collection expenditures across operating funds compared to total operating fund expenditures. And I can answer more questions about that as we go. I can go back to that now. I don't want to spend a whole lot more time on this right now because I want to get through this, but I'm more than willing to have this conversation either on chat or if you want to give me a call to follow up on this. Don asked if IMLS only considers full-time to be 40 hours and our full-time is only 35. Are we reporting that position as full-time? Yes, you're reporting what you consider full-time. And in fact, if you, on the next page, you'll see we even ask what you consider full-time. But don't worry if your full-time is less, it's your designation. If you designate someone at 30 hours a week as full-time, then you count them as a full-time employee. It just means that when we do the full-time calculation, you may end up employing a partial full-time employee by the math. And yes, oh yes, and somebody says you want the most current info. On this one, we do. Okay, total number of all other paid staff. So anyone who's not a librarian, this could, anyone else on the payroll, and this could be anyone from pages, clerks, security, maintenance people. If they get a W-2 from you, this is where you would count them. Total number of paid hours per week for all paid staff, and the full-time equivalent for all other paid staff. And then we'll give you we'll automatically calculate for you the total number of all paid staff, librarians and other, total hours per week for all paid staff, full-time equivalent for all paid staff, and there's that question I just referred to as 713, which is the number of hours per week considered to be full-time employment in your library. So if it's something other than that 40 hours, we're especially interested to know. Library service and technology. This is where we ask programming questions. So this is where you're going to see a ton of those new questions added that have to do with the virtual programming. So this section probably grew the most because we're really trying to capture those. And again, I encourage you to keep statistics into this 2021 year because it almost certainly is not something that's going to go away in the future. It may be modified and what we look to as metrics may be modified, but I suspect virtual programming is here to stay because the public sure seems to like it. So library service and technology, as I said, includes programming, but not only programming. So the first questions you see have to do with interlibrary loans. So we're looking for total number of interlibrary loans, including photocopies. Your library has provided 2 other libraries. Then Evergreen Transits 2, Circs Materials 2, and then the total number of loans provided 2. So as far as Evergreen goes, if you are an Evergreen library, we will be pre-filling that information for you as well as the plaque information later in section 12. We will be uploading that for you. We can't do it right away. We can't do it when the survey first opens because chances are the year won't be finished by then. So if you're an Evergreen library and you're looking for information to be pre-filled, look for that within probably the second week of January. The same goes for libraries that have used Circs. We will pre-fill all the Circs information for you. Maybe it's not pre-fill if it comes in after the fact, but we will fill that in for you. If you beat us to the punch, don't panic. It should be in there early to mid-January. So I went through all the interlibrary loans too, then we go through and we do interlibrary loans received for those same categories, and then we figure out the net lending rate, which is the number of items loaned divided by the number of items borrowed. And the reason we look at that is if you are a massive lender, if you give far more items out, if you loan out far more items than you take in, you may be entitled to some compensation for the state library. There's a handful of libraries that get some money back for that. Here's the programming questions that we spoke of. So the first ones here are the in-person ones, and these should look very familiar. Number of children's programs held in the library and then held outside of the library. Number of young adult programs held in the library and held outside of the library. And I'll say here that children's is considered 0 to 11, young adult is considered 12 to 18, adult is considered 18 plus. Somebody's going to point out to me that 18 is in both categories, and I am going to say, yes, I know. That's what they told us. Just ask yourself, was this geared towards adult? Who's the target audience? Was it geared towards adult? Was it geared towards young adults? You guys know what that is. So we asked for the number of adult programs, the number of general all ages programs held in the library. This could be family programming. This is essentially programming that has multiple age groups. So maybe it's a grandma and grandkid gardening program, and that goes for kids, and that goes for seniors. There's 2 age groups. Maybe it's an all-family game night. If it doesn't fit easily into one of the other categories, there you go, general all ages. We asked for the total number of non-library sponsored programs. And the reason we do this, this is, for a lot of people, this is meeting room usage. So you are not putting on the program, but you are providing the space for someone else to do it. We know this is hard to capture exactly for many people, especially when we get into attendance, so just give us your best estimate. We like to have this because it's a good way to show how the community uses your building. Even if they're not coming in for programs you provide, perhaps you're giving them a valuable space. And then we have the total number of all in-person library-sponsored programs that will be calculated for you. Then we go through and we ask those questions, the exact same questions, only we ask them about attendance. So instead of the number that you had, number of programs, we'll ask for attendance at children's, at young adults, at adult, at general. And a note on attendance. Please do not agonize over trying to separate into the groups within your program. If they look at the target audience of your program, count everybody who shows up at that as attendance for that program and count it towards that target audience. So essentially, let's say we're looking at a teen makerspace and you have, or makerspace event or maker program STEAM event. You have some parents who show up just to sit in the room and watch what's going on. Maybe you have some younger siblings who show up and tag along and they want to watch, or they get to participate because you have some extra kits. Ask yourself, who is the audience, teens, count everybody in the room, including the parents and the little ones, and then put that attendance towards teen attendance. We're not going to try to ask you to separate within there. We know that the age groups are not real exact in attendance, especially when you get into things like story times, which are aimed to kids, but baby story times, usually people don't just fling their kids in the room and run. So we know that, it's okay. We ask for total attendance at non-library sponsored programs. I already alluded to this. This can be really tricky if you have outside groups using your meeting room to try to get a count on them, whether you're kind of peering through a meeting room door, whether you are trying to remember to ask the organizer to, hey, give us a head count on your way out. A lot of times it just doesn't happen. I totally get that. Give us your best estimate again. Total children's program attendance, young adult, and all programs are going to be automatically calculated for you. Here's one of our new ones. Did the library create live virtual programs via the internet during the coronavirus pandemic? This is just a yes or no question. And then we get into all the numbers. So again, remembering that virtual live programs are programs that aren't happening face-to-face, but are still happening in real time. So live streaming programs. We ask for number of children's virtual, young adult virtual, and general, and it will total those for you. And then we ask those attendance questions. And same rules apply to virtual programs as apply to in-person. Don't try to break out the attendance group. Don't drive yourself nuts doing that. And I mentioned earlier in our overview, do the best you can with attendance, because I know that sometimes the number of live streams does not represent exactly the number of people there. Give us your best estimate based on what you're seeing. Total number of children's live programs, total number of adults, total number. So here this page is all the total number of attendance for live programming. Those will all be pre-filled for you based on the answers that you gave us. Oh, I'm sorry, let me make a distinction here. These are not just the live programming. What you see on this page is children's live programs, and I say includes in-person and live totals. So these totals are still going to be filled by you, or I'm sorry, filled by us. They are automatically calculated, but the difference between these and the other totals is we're taking the live virtual programming numbers and we're combining them with the live in person. Because IMLS decided for programming, they are going to count live programming. They are not counting recorded programming numbers. We are, as a state library. IMLS is not, so again, that's why we're doing some combinations for them, because they want those numbers. They need distinctions that we don't. Here's another yes or no question. Did the library create and provide recordings of program content during the internet during the coronavirus pandemic? IMLS does want to know whether you created it, so this is yes or no. Here at the State Library, we got a lot of feedback saying that people would like it to go into a little more depth. So that's why you see number of virtual programs and then the number of page views or hits on those virtual programs. You can just take the tabulation at the end of the year. You don't have to break it out month by month. You want to record the page views or hits for the entirety of the time it's up during 2020. So if you post a story time and leave it up for a month, you get to get all of those hits on the story time. If you post a story time in May and you never take them down, you just leave them on a page as an archive, then you get all the story time hits from May through the end of the year. So for the duration of the time it's up there, you get to count the hits. Again, this may change in future years if IMLS decides it wants a piece of this and they change the metrics, but for now, this is how we're going to be measuring it for us. How many weeks of a children's reading program did it offer? This is another one, standards. We're giving people a pass on standards. It doesn't have to be concurrent. You can have winter and summer, but regardless, we know it might have been hard for a lot of you. We get a lot of the people telling us that they just weren't able to do it all this year, and that's fine. Total number of annual visits to the library, library visits reporting method, that's what I mentioned before. Just tell us if it was an actual or an estimate. Number of reference transactions per year, reference transactions reported method. Reference transactions can be tricky, so be sure to read the instructions on that if in doubt whether something counts or not. Essentially, we just don't want to inflate those numbers with directional things. If somebody's asking you, where is the bathroom, or how do I get to the copier? Those are not really reference questions. For questions that are referenced and take an exceptionally long time, we have included instructional reference service. Those are longer one-on-one interactions. They could be things like how to upload a book to your Kindle, or we're giving you resume help. We put that question in there for libraries that are tracking those longer questions separate from the regular reference questions. IMLS doesn't care about the duration of a reference question. A 2-second question counts the same as a 20-minute question. But again, a lot of librarians told us, well, we kind of want to know how that's counted because, you know, that represents a difference in service and a difference in our time. So if you break those numbers out and can provide that to us, that is fantastic. Database collection, we'll fill in Inspire databases. If you have other databases that you pay for, you put them there, you count them, and you put your names in there, and then we'll total them up for you. We need to know some information about computers and access, so number of public internet computer uses per year, wireless internet uses per year, how many public internet computers you have system-wide, and this is a computer that can be used by the patrons to access the internet. So this could be laptop or desktop. Number of staff computers, and number of website visits. These are things you should be able to get from your internet provider as far as wireless visits, or you should be able to get online your website metrics. So think about where you'll be looking for those. Does your library have an automated bookkeeping system? Yes, no. Name of that bookkeeping system. So if it's Voice, if it's Excel or QuickBooks, I should say, put that in there. Random version of your ILS, you'll want to put that in there. If I'm picking up speed, it's because we have 20 minutes. I told you I'm going to get us out of here on time. So circulation and holdings, I don't think anything changed in this section. This is one of the few. So you see, before I go too far, I'm going to make a distinction here that I think is important. These are selected holdings and selected circulations, just like we had selected programs. Not everything we do is going to be captured by the metrics. There are some things that just don't fit into the collections. There are some programs that are really awesome that just don't really have a place because they're not technically programs or whatnot. Know that not everything will have a place. This is a selection, and we're aware that there are some shortcomings, and there are always going to be with the survey. So with that in mind, aren't you excited to fill it out? Circulation. We want to know the circulation of all physical items, so if you can hold it in your hand, tell us the number of circulations. This does include renewals. Use of electronic materials. This is going to be things like ebooks, things that have to be quote-unquote returned. They cannot be kept by the patron. Successful retrieval of electronic information are things that are streaming, things that maybe allow for many simultaneous use, things like Hoopla. That's the main one that we get questions about. We have a really great What Goes Where handout that will be updated and put on our sites that has some of the major services and kind of helps you decide, does it go in 902, does it go in 903? We'll total that electronic content. Here's where it's really important to not put down 0 if you can't. If you can't estimate, please tell us NA. Don't put down 0 because that makes it look like you don't offer those services, even if you do. Circulation of children's materials, you'll just get from your ILS. It's whatever you designated a children's material, so just pull that number from the system. Total circulation of all materials and total collection use. Total in-house usage of materials. This is one that may well go down if you're used to doing a typical week estimation. So try to give us your best guess based on maybe some of your higher numbers from the years, if you have a sense of that from earlier in the year. If you're not comfortable giving an estimate, you can always put NA in here. Selected holdings, and again, there's that selected, but we'll ask about the number of books in print. Does the library belong to an ebook consortium? If yes, what the name of that is. We're looking for number of ebooks local holdings, so purchased exclusively for your libraries, non-consortium. Then we look for consortium holdings. It will add those together. We repeat the same thing with physical videos. Do you have local? Do you have consortium? Audio materials that are physical. We ask about current print serial subscriptions, current electronic serial subscriptions, non-traditional items, realia, or kits. So these are physical units. These are your library of things that certainly aren't books, but deserve to be counted. And then, does your library circulate hotspots, yes or no? Library board, this is one where we want the absolute most current. We use this for our records. So if something changes between the end of the year and when you're filling that out, please give us the most current. A huge heads up. Coming in 2021, there will be a trustee audit. Somebody will be looking through our records and making sure that everything's A-okay with that, that we don't have someone who's somehow slid in with 14 consecutive terms or, issues that are not allowed by the state or standards. So we will look through that and make sure everything is A-okay according to law and contact you if there are issues. But that's why it's especially important to make sure that you have your library board information updated. So we'll ask you about all of your board members, members and I should say like president, vice president, secretary, so officers. You see president is first up here. We want name, we want address. We do not publish this anywhere, so you don't have to worry about your board members, email address going up on our website. Again, this is for our own internal purposes and making sure everything is A-okay by the law. We also ask about appointing authority, so whether it was a county commissioner or a school board or whatnot. Date the term expires, number of consecutive terms used, and date of initial appointment. And we ask this for all of the board members. There are likely going to be more spaces for members than you have, and that's for those county contractual libraries which have more board members. For the rest of you, you will be stopping at 7 total. What day of the month and what time is the board meeting? So Monday, third Monday at 7. It's just something descriptive there for us. Salary and benefits. Here's another one where it's really important to give us the most up-to-date. This is something just for use with the state. People want to know what other people are paying their employees or what other employees are getting paid. We'll ask for the salary of the director as an annual thing, and for everyone else, it's going to be, please figure it out hourly. And use the rate that you would offer if you were putting the job up today. So if you have somebody who's making a really high rate because they've been grandfathered in or there forever, but they would, if you were to hire a new person today, they would probably never get that high. Use what you would put on salary schedule today. So if somebody called you up and said, I'm going to hire a children's librarian, about what do you pay them? This would be how you would answer them. Does the library director have an employment contract? Yes, no. Most people that's going to be no. It's the only person we ask that about. And the current level of certification held by the director. Then you can see, as I mentioned, you put in minimum and maximum hourly wages. And this would be projected ones, not what you're actually doing. Going on to salary and benefits, we break down the benefits by full-time and part-time. You can see there, these are pretty, I'm not going to read through all of them for you, but they're things like life, vision. So if you offer it, these are all yes or no questions, aside from the 2 at the bottom, which are other 1 and other 2. So if you offer some sort of cool benefit or something you think is a cool benefit, please put it in there because we see a lot of things that don't necessarily get covered in these categories here that are worth mentioning. We ask the same questions for part-time. Then we go to paid time off and we break it down again into full-time librarian. We also part-time librarian, full-time support staff, part-time support staff. But we're looking at paid time off. You can see the different days we differentiate there. If you have a paid time off bank, if you don't give someone vacation days and sick days per se, but you give them one sum total, go ahead and put that in 1150 or 530. Just put that sum total there. where it says specify, you could just put, PTA or PTO, I'm sorry, PTA, PTO. If you just put a lump sum there and leave the others blank, we'll know what that's for. Plaque loans. If you're evergreen, as I mentioned, this will be filled in for you. We only want to know the loans that you sent out. This is one of the few sections where you don't have to fill in every question. You can leave them blank. You don't have to go through and fill in zeros for the libraries that you didn't send plaque loans to. If you didn't do plaque loans to any library, you can just skip this section. Compliance for libraries with public standards. This hasn't changed from year to year. This is essentially sitting down with the standards, which we can steer you to online if you don't know where they are, and going through and saying, hey, did you do this? Yes, no. If not, why not? This goes through all of them. So you can see we have some questions at the front that have to do with staying in standards legally as far as ADA compliance and building standards and things like that. And again, I'm picking up speed because I want to make sure we get to the supplemental questions. If you have follow-up questions, don't hesitate to ask me. Do the library, we go into board and directors. There's a whole section about this on standards. We want to make sure that you're making a distinction between board duty and director duties. We want to make sure the director is working full-time. We have a definition of what full-time is for a director in the help, if you need any help with that. And we start looking at, do you have policies that are required? So again, yes or no, do you have these following policies? You see more questions about, sure. Does the library bylaw specifically state rules governing conflicts of interest? So basically, this is a bylaw section that's going through yes or no. Do you have this bylaw that's required? And have you filed them with the state? If we don't have a recent copy of your bylaws on file, this is a great chance to remember to shoot us an email at the Library Development Office with that. And you can just send that to statewide services at library.in.gov or one of us who works here, and we'll make sure that gets filed. Again, things that you are required to have: collection development plan, circulation policy. When we say support for continuing education, this can come in many different forms. This doesn't necessarily mean that you're paying for everyone to go to library school. This could mean that you provide them time off to go to conferences, or maybe you pay for conferences, but maybe you just give them time during the workday to watch webinars and make sure they get their LAUs. As long as you provide some sort of support, whatever form, that would be considered a yes. We have a whole section of question on long-range plans. You should have one on file. It should be for 3 to 5 years. It should be current. So we ask about when it started, when it ends, and then we go in and we break down what should be in that long-range plan. This is all in the standards. This is all hopefully stuff that looks familiar if you've done a long-range plan. And just like with the bylaws, if you realize that, oh shoot, we never submitted our long-range plan, now's a great time to. Or if you're not sure if we have the most recent one, send us an email and we can check that for you. We ask about resource sharing because you are required to, as a library, to stay in standards to have some sort of resource sharing between libraries. You can see we have things like InfoExpress, OCLC, being a member of Evergreen. You just need one of these. You do not need to be Evergreen and use OCLC and use InfoExpress and use Circs or whatnot. You can just, as long as you can check yes to one of these, you will be fine. We go through services. Does your library provide adult services, including reference, a collection of materials specifically for adult, and a space designated for adults? We repeat those questions for young adults and children's services. We have accessibility questions about whether they have access to large print books, audio books. Do you provide computers for everyone who comes to your library, regardless of whether they're a resident? Do you have a means to print? Questions about having everything required on the website. Yep, I'm picking up speed. Statement of intent to comply with standards. This is just one question that says, if you answered no to any of the questions, but you're working on it, you have a good reason, this is your chance to explain to us what's going on. Now, we'll certainly follow up with you because we want to make sure people stay in standards as much as possible. We want people to get all those subsidies, all those things they're eligible for. So we'll be talking to you to see what we can do to keep you on track, if it's something that you need a waiver for, etc. Finally, the supplemental questions. I mentioned that most of these are provided by IMLS. They have to do with COVID services or COVID-affected services, and they are yes, no, which you'll see right away. Were any of your outlets physically closed due to coronavirus pandemic? This should be really easy to answer because you already calculated the hours way back in section 1. Did you continue to provide services to the public during any portion of the period when the building was physically closed? Services include pretty much anything that follows in the questions: reference services, curbside, using Wi-Fi in the parking lot. If you turn Wi-Fi on for them, that's considered a service. So if you can answer yes to any of those, if you go down the list and answer yes, then yes, you provided services. Did the library add or increase access to collection of materials due to coronavirus? And here's where that question of what if we added more access to Hoopla? If you changed your budget, if you re-steered some money in there into it because you knew, oh, most people can't come to the library, that's going to be considered adding or increasing. Did you provide Wi-Fi internet access to users outside of the building at one or more outlets before the pandemic? So were you already letting people hop on your Wi-Fi in your gazebo or in your parking lot or whatnot? If you weren't before, did you add it during the coronavirus pandemic? So if 15.8 was no, did you add it during this time? And if you already had it, did you increase it? Some libraries left Wi-Fi on the whole night, all through the night when they never did that before, or they extended the service area. They gave that a boost. So if you increased it in any way, you can answer yes to that. Did the library staff work for other government agencies or nonprofit organizations instead of or in addition to their normal duties during the pandemic? So this would be if they were on the clock and working for someone else, if they were asked by another government agency to come work there while things were shut down. Now, if they were doing it on a volunteer basis, that would not count. Take and make, they're also called grab and go. They're kits, they're passive activities where the library has put together something that a patron can come in and grab, and then it's a project in a bag, essentially. So did you offer those sort of things prior to the pandemic, yes or no? Did you add or increase them during the pandemic? So whether you had them before or you're just adding them, basically, did the pandemic cause you to up those offerings? And then for those of you who track such things, if you can tell us the number of activities distributed, that would be fantastic. We realize not everyone's been tabulating it. This, again, is a new question. Here's some questions that are non-COVID related that we've been told a lot of libraries wanted to know the answer to. These are entirely optional. If you are not comfortable answering this for any reason, we had some libraries who were hesitant to put out there whether they had Narcan or Narcan especially. But for the rest of you, these are just yes or no. Do you own these items? Not whether you've used them, but whether you do have them on your premises. Finally, certification. You do need to certify this before it's done. You can see here, this is the signature page. There are several places where you can print this page because you will need to review this and get signatures on this. If you cannot find them, it's going to be in your letter that I send you with your login. There's a couple places you can find it on the report. Submitting the report, you will need to it won't let you submit until you clear all the edit checks. So if there's something that triggered an edit check, if there was a number that was just such a huge difference from previous years, something that was the exact same number that normally wouldn't be, say reference questions or whatnot, you may have to make a note in the federal notes to explain that. You can, oh sure, no online. Oh, okay, Don, thanks for letting me know. It looks like there's an issue with the online version. So I will see what's going on with that. And if you check back later today, or I'd say give us till tomorrow. Well, tomorrow will be closed. Give us till Thursday. The gal who updates those is wonderfully fast, but I don't know what's on her plate today. But I will get that fixed and ask her to repost a corrected version. You'll see on this submit the survey, this is what the screen's going to look like when you go to submit. It will look for whether you answered all the required questions. It will look for whether you've annotated the ones that have edit checks. So you'll need all three of those lines to have green check marks before it will let you submit it. Once you do, you can celebrate, yes, you are done. If you submit something and you feel great and you wander away and then you wake up in a cold sweat because you realize you inadvertently answered something wrong, we are not going to come for you. I would ask that you give me a call. I will be able to unlock that survey and either correct it for you or let you in to correct it for yourself. So then you can relock it and we will celebrate again. Finally, if you have any questions, I know that the survey is a beast in most years, and especially this year, it's going to be a learning experience for all of us. But feel free to contact me. Those are my hours where you are guaranteed to get me. I'm usually here a little bit later. And again, if you can always contact Bibliostat if it's something like password or technical issues. Oh, let's see what else we have on here. Does a board member who takes over someone else's term need to count that as part of their 16 years? There are actually rules about that related to what part, how long they take over. And that's listed out in the code, isn't it, Haley? Yeah. Okay, so if you go to the code, the part of the code that deals with board members, it actually states that, if you take over a period of time, this is going to count as your first term versus there is a clear delineation point. So I will see, Julie, if I can just look that up for you and shoot you that. Oh, Haley is on it. Haley is going to see if she can find that for you, because that's a pretty clear yes or no or question about whether it counts as a term or not. There she goes. And hey, we are 4 minutes ahead of where I was last time. So if there's any last minute questions, I know there were a handful of things I was going to do to look up the PowerPoint, things like air conditioning that I will have to do a little bit more research on, things like paying employees with CARES Act money. So those are two I see in my notes right here to follow up on. If you think of something else after the fact, shoot me an email and I'll either reply to you individually or I'll decide that a lot of people will have the same question and I'll put that on the worksheet. It's going to take me a little while to put together the worksheet, hopefully by the end of this week or early next week, just depending on what blows up in the meantime. But it will be well in advance of the December opening of the survey. So it looks like people are breaking for lunch. Thank you, everyone. Again, make use of my email if you need to or my phone number. And I'm going to mute this for now. Thanks, Haley.
Thank you so much, Angela. You are fantastic. We are going to go ahead and take our break. It's about 12:30 now, and we are going to come back at 2 p.m. for the bookkeeping portion of the workshop. In the window, you will see a link to download your LEU certificate for this morning's session, and that link will be up for about 15 minutes, so please go ahead and download it now. If you have trouble with that, just send me an email and I'll make sure you get an LEU certificate for the morning. Otherwise, we will see you at 2 p.m. Thank you.